Welcome to the Gnomad Podcast. I am your host, Gnomad, and with us today is Immanuel Kingman, truth seeker, energy worker, and host of the Goodness Over Darkness podcast, along with his co-host, Mimi. I highly recommend everyone to go and check it out. He recently put together a phenomenal blog on Tartaria, which we will be discussing today. Welcome, guys. How's it going?
Hello, hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us on. This is Mimi's first guest spot on
It
a
is.
podcast.
I didn't even think
Yay.
of that. Yay. I'm
I
excited.
feel
Yeah.
honored and fresh
I'm
with the new
glad it's you.
background.
Yeah, we got the new setup. We got a shelf back here with. So I had a bunch of cool stuff all over my desk. We have a huge desk in front of us that goes across the entire room. And
I made it, actually.
well, it's
I
a
did.
wonderful desk, and there's shelves on it, and we've been filling it up with stuff. And I was like, you know what? I want a shelf back here to get this on camera. So now we got it.
I love it. Looks good.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start off with wondering kind of what got you into Tartaria? What was kind of the thing that
Ooh.
really made it, stand out to you?
I heard Andreas Exertus on Tinfoil Hat. So I heard several different people talk about it, but it never sounded interesting. It was, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but I heard about the melted buildings theory that mountains are melted, and I was like, that's nonsense. I heard another aspect that the cathedrals all had these huge organs in them, and they were some kind of healing centers, and I was like, that sounds stupid. And then when I heard Andreas Exertus, he really kind of put things together, and he intrigued me, and I was like, okay. So then I found him on other podcasts, and I was actually driving from Georgia to Pennsylvania I think it was to go pick up my daughter over the summer, something like that. And I heard him on Conspiracy Castle with Alex Stein, and it was the funniest podcast I ever heard. And
Alex Stein cracks me up.
yeah, the two of them together, it was so funny. So anyway, from there, that was my introduction, and it just seems that more and more I'm being led into the direction of uncovering this covered up history that, I mean, it's obviously it did exist, and it's a covered up history. So what it is, where it was, what's exactly going on, I really feel like Christ was calling me to uncover, to bring forth the knowledge that I can gather through my podcasting and research. So that's what really got me
Just
into
one of
it.
those interesting rabbit holes to go down.
It's like the ultimate rabbit hole, essentially, because in my opinion, it's that is the conspiracy theory that all other conspiracy theories then branch off of, because it's all covering up what Tartaria is actually covering up.
Right. I noticed you talk a bit about a globe that you had. How did that come to be? How did you end up finding that? And I actually have a photo. I'll bring it up here.
Yeah, so this was at my
Synchronicities.
sister's house. Her boyfriend, I don't know, found it somewhere. And Todd said he wanted it. And I said, well, how much do you want for it? And he was like, oh, like $40. I'm like, all right, we'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah, because
it opens up, you can put like bottles in it and stuff.
Yeah, so at first they were like, oh, like $140. I was like, yeah, I'll take it. And then they were just joking when they said it. So then they did give it to us for $40. But yeah, it's a huge globe. I mean, it's like 3.5, 4 feet tall off the ground. And the globe part itself is probably 2 feet. Like you see the top half right there. There's a whole bottom half that's the same exact size under that you can't see. But the reason why we really want it is because it says Tartaria is so big on it, and it's in a different location than most maps that you see. Like you see the other ones on here that these are ones that we found searching out St. Augustine. We've just found these maps in gift shops and globes that say Grand Tartary and Tartaria on them. But every one map that you see, Russia's usually in the northeast to what Tartaria is. This is like the way it's depicted in this thing. It's like it's a continent is Tartaria rather than just a country. It's like the way that Asia would be written in a normal globe, and it just really intrigues me. So it opens up, and on the inside of it, it actually has all the astrology as
I
well.
was just gonna
I was
say,
gonna
isn't
ask
there's
about
something
that.
on the
Yeah.
inside. I think there is on the
Yeah.
inside top of the globe. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all in Latin as well, which you can see like there's measurements across the top on the wooden part and on the side, go the ring around it. So there's a lot of weird, interesting stuff about this thing, and I think it's a free Masonic thing. So I was like, yeah, this is worth having for me. This is something that I want to have just in case.
I believe
you never
Tierra
know.
del Fuego's on there too, right? On this
It
one?
may be.
I think so.
I'm not sure. You have to get low on the floor to see it. So
Yeah, that's super interesting.
That's just my height.
Yeah, that's crazy. So what do you think? Do you think one of these is more accurate than the other? Would you say? I mean, it seems like maybe the ones in the gift shops aren't as accurate as like this older, maybe more authentic one.
I can't say for sure. When you
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell.
I
When
kind of feel like gift shop things are kind of mass produced for gift shops, so you don't
Right.
Yeah.
really know.
and they're
know.
tiny. I mean, that one on the left hand side there, that one, it's like the size of
Yeah, you can see your thumb.
yeah. I mean, it's tiny. And I didn't buy it. I probably should have. It was like $5, but I was like, nah, it's too small. I don't want it. So I just took the picture. But it's hard to say if any of them are really accurate when you start looking into maps. And this is the thing about maps. When you start looking into the 1500s, maps from the 1600s, even you can find some in the 1300s, and they're very, very, very different than what we have today. None of them are globes. They're very strange. So to say one is more right than the other, I think it's just like these cartographers and however they were mapping it. It brings up an anomaly to me right off the bat is how did they get these what are they called? The lines
Meridians?
no, not the meridians. The energetic lines.
Longitude,
Ley lines?
latitude,
The ley lines.
Okay.
And I think that maybe they could see them before. I think maybe our sky is actually just a projection, that everything we see in the sky is a projection, that's on the firmament. It's being projected there from NASA, and that maybe at one time we could actually see the ley lines because we were energetically connected and we could just see it, and that's how they mapped it. Someone told me that maybe they would use like dowsing rods in order to figure it out. That's impossible.
I forget how Michelle Gibson explained it.
I don't think anyone could explain it. I don't.
It's very hard to comprehend based on even our current knowledge how they would do that.
Yeah, how could they, like, honestly, how could they ever come up with the concept of ley lines with their diagonal, they're intersecting at different places? I mean, it's just really ridiculous when you think about it, that
just seem like
anyone could ever come up with that.
High energy
unless they could say it.
Right. And it's like, I don't know, do you know what year they, I guess, decided that the world was round, if everyone used to think it was flat?
So it's a weird thing because everyone has the Columbus thing stuck in their head, where that he wanted to prove the earth was round, and Columbus maybe didn't even exist, but everyone realizes that story's nonsense as far as what happened with the natives. But the mainstream masses, they still don't realize that the globe thing is nonsense. So when it really changed over was like the 1940s and 1950s. They stopped teaching flat earth in school, and I am not in the belief that it is a flat earth in the way that the flat earth society or whatever, people who believe in flat earth are. I think we're in a ball or an egg there's flat surface that's running somewhere in the middle, and that's what we're on. So
yeah, so would you say essentially it's like we live on, instead of being like around it, we're kind of like inside of it with like a firmament,
on the top and below.
But then I was going to say, but still something below us is just not in the way that we perceive it. Right.
Yeah. So I play with different ideas, and I'm very fluid with my thinking. The only thing I'm really solid in is that Jesus Christ saved my life. So
Amen.
outside of that, I don't hold anything too particular, because you can't really tell the truth, because there's so much evidence of so many different things. I just know that we're not on the outside of a ball. It's ridiculous. But the thing is, with observational science, we definitely are on a flat surface. So in between those two things, that we're not on a rounded surface and we're definitely on a flat surface, then that's when I come up with that we're inside of a ball or egg, because I know we're in a firmament. I have photos of the grid system, which we were just talking about, the ley lines. I have photos of a grid from the night sky that I took. I just took a random photo of the black night sky last year, or maybe a year and a half ago. And there it is. It's just grid lines, just going
So you
back
like zoom in and you can literally see a grid.
Yeah,
Like you can see it. Like I could see it, and it shocked
That's
me. So
crazy.
I'm like, yeah, right. Okay, whatever. You caught a grid on your
Yeah,
camera.
and somebody called me control opposition. I had like 50
No,
followers.
I saw it myself.
I
Made
had,
it.
I had like 50 listens on my
I was
podcast,
there.
and I'm putting it down on Instagram, and I got called controlled opposition. You need to show me that you took it with this kind of and this. And I'm like,
just
dude,
your
I took it
phone,
with
man.
my phone.
Yeah.
I don't
that's
know any
hilarious.
camera tricks.
Yeah, I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard like the first rule of rocket science is to assume you're on a flat surface, which
That's
is interesting.
Huh.
Yeah.
Pilots, they fly as if the Earth is flat. The thing with people will bring up snipers, but snipers are accounting for the curvature of light, because
Yeah.
light bends. We know light bends. So they're accounting for the curvature of light, not the curvature of the Earth. So, when someone brings that up to you, if you talk about flat Earth, be like, oh no, they're accounting for the curvature of light. And then boom, you sound like a real scientist, because that's real shit. The
Yeah, that's
curvature of
fact.
light.
Yeah, very interesting. I know a lot of people hear flat Earth and they just assume like it's a map, it's like, but it's definitely deeper than that, I think.
Yeah,
So,
and they also think that it's a flat disc in space, that we're spinning in space still.
Frisbee.
Yeah,
1,000
yeah.
miles an hour or whatever.
Yeah, we're not moving. I
Yeah.
asked my daughter this yesterday. I was like, "Do you think we're moving?" She's like, "No, we're not moving." And then she's like, "But the sun's not moving." They tell me that in school, and I'm like, "Don't you see the sun move?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "All right, are we moving?" No. Okay, then the sun's moving, right?
Yeah, that's crazy. I love that you're having those conversations with your daughter at such a young age. That's important.
Yeah, well, she can handle it now. She's 12, and she's red pilled into a lot of different things. And essentially, she only really believes me because of these magical abilities that I've been granted. When she's sick and is having trouble breathing, and I do some breathing exercises with her, I take the illness from her, and then it took a while for her to really give into it, because she's like, "You're crazy. My mom thinks you're crazy, and grandpa thinks you're crazy," all that. And then I showed her magic, and she was like, "Okay, maybe he's not crazy." And she really opened up to me when she developed her own personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and she got me this WWJD bracelet that she got some for herself and her friends and myself. So after that, it's been nothing but puppy dogs and roses
Wonderful.
since then. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And when you say, magic, would you say that you got those abilities once you came to know Christ and started operating in his name?
Okay, so it's a
wouldn't.
tricky space. I found it before I was saved by Christ, but I wasn't really using it. I had these crazy abilities all of a sudden that just came to me, but I wasn't really using it until I was saved by Christ, and then he showed me the way of how you use these things, and he brings different people into my sphere of knowing and awareness, that I kind of just take on other people's abilities when I communicate with someone. Our consciousness mixes, and I kind of can pull their abilities into myself and mimic it, essentially. And he taught me, he's led the way with my podcast, and he's led the way with my energy work, and it is only through Christ that I do any of this energy work that I now do. So while the ability started before I knew him, well, actually, so my first psychedelic trip, I saw him, his face, but I was told in my ear by someone else while he was smiling, nodding, and winking that he wasn't for me, but he would help anybody who asked him to. But he wasn't for me. He winked and nodded and smiled, and now I realize, that was kind of a trick, or that I wasn't ready for him, so I had to go do the exploring thing elsewhere, because once you find him, you really let go of everything else. So I needed to shore up that he was the thing. I had to go looking everywhere else. And then he came to me in my clouds, which is if anyone goes to my website, ImmanuelKingman.com, and goes to the photos section, photos 1, you'll see him. I think it's the second photo, the first one on the right. It's oh, thank you for putting that up on the screen. That's awesome.
You're on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want people to know where to find your content, because you got a lot of great content on there. So everybody go check it out.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he came to me in my clouds, which was another weird thing, but I kept getting information coming to me that May 17th, that something was going to appear to me in my clouds, and I was thinking it was going to be like Nibiru and Anunnaki aliens were coming, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm like, nothing even happened, but I'm outside on my porch because my cat had run away a few days earlier. And then I get the urge to look up and take a picture, and Jesus Christ is in my sky, and now I can interact with beings in my clouds. I see them, and the thing that makes them real, like people will say, like, oh, you can see anything in your clouds. The things that makes them real is the irises. When you look at their eyes, you can see the irises of, the colored part. It's not colored in, but you can see that there's an iris there. So that's what really makes it very interesting. So I'm hearing things when I'm looking at these clouds, and it's like I'm having a conversation. And the more that I do that, or the more that I've done that, the more that I realize, oh, I actually am communicating with something, and this is how it all operates.
That's
and
awesome.
I can never see anything in the clouds, like unless he points it out. He'll be like, "Look at this." No, the only thing that I've seen clear as day was like this praying mantis thing, gigantic, like praying man. I'm like, and I watched it for the longest time as it was like kind of, how the clouds kind of dissipate a little bit. And finally, I called him over. I'm like, you can still see this. Like, come look what I see.
Oh, and what I was listening to when we saw that was Ron Weed, someone who I had on my podcast. He was on Upstate Unconventional talking about his encounter with a mantis being. I also have had encounters with a mantis being because I was abducted my entire life until I was saved by Christ. So as I'm listening,
and he had headphones on, so I don't know he's listening to this.
Yeah. So as I'm listening to this
crazy.
In my headphones, she calls me over and says there's a mantis being in the sky.
Clear as anything.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Clearest thing.
What was the vibe when you saw that? Did you have any type of specific feeling?
F you.
Yeah, that was the vibe.
Yeah. When I see certain ones,
I see this.
Yeah, when I see certain ones, I guess it's maybe like PTSD a bit, and it brings up. There's some tough memories that I have to deal with that I don't really talk about too often. You'll have your Corey Good and David Wilcock that they make a living off of that type of stuff.
Ugh, chills.
Yeah, I don't know that it's all that real with them. To some degree, it's real information. I don't know if it's their information, but it is some real information.
Ugh.
But for me, they're not comfortable memories to make that my life.
Right. Yeah.
I'd rather talk about being sexually abused as a child, honestly, than that, because it's more comfortable, and that's not an easy thing to talk about. So that's how uncomfortable it is to talk about abduction phenomena.
Well, we don't have to go into detail on that, but do you mind, like, I've always been curious on how it first happens, or was there any sort of warning signs, or did you see anything before it happened, or was it just like usually boom, like you're somewhere? You know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but it's not something that I remembered ever in the moment. It was once I started awakening and started playing with psychedelics and meditation and exploring my psyche, that's when I remembered. And then I would have dreams, and then I would recall my psyche in different moments. Why was I afraid of the windows? Why was I afraid of the basement?
Mm.
Why was I afraid of my backyard at night? All these different scenarios coinciding with uncovering these memories and remembering that I had these terrifying dreams, and also remembering all the times that I woke up sweating in the middle of the night, and just being afraid of the dark in my own house. Like you have to hurry up and run and turn a light on, so because you feel like something's watching you, or just you want to keep that fridge. You want the door to slowly shut while you're running back to your room, so you have light on. Just these uncomfortable feelings that we have that I didn't know I had in me really until I was saved by Christ, and then all of it went away, and then I walked around like my like my shit didn't stink, and it was like, oh, I never used to do this before. I'm a grown man, 31 years old, and I don't remember ever being this confident in the dark before. And I'm a large man, and I've been in a lot of fights, and I've been to prison, and I consider myself at one time to be tough, and now I just think that's nonsense. But it wasn't that I was some child or some person who's afraid of conflict, but I was always afraid of the dark until I was saved by Christ, because I could always, as the energetic being that I know that I am now, and the energy work that I do, I realized that there were things there, that I was feeling them. I just didn't know what it was, and it's really scared me, to the point that I was afraid to walk in my kitchen in the middle of the night because of the dark. I was afraid of looking outside of my window for what I might see. And that actually, brings up memories of seeing grays staring at me through my basement window. And so they would take me. So there's at least one time where they took my physical body because I have implants all over my body. As far as how many times they took my physical body, I'm not sure, but I think it was mostly just taking my consciousness. That's much easier, and it's also like a time manipulation thing, so they don't really have to disrupt your sleeping, but you never really sleep because your consciousness is not there, so you're not sleeping well. So then you do drugs to be up because you're so tired, and then it's a whole cycle. So to answer your question, yes, your physical body is taken, but it's mostly, I think, your consciousness just gets zapped out of you.
Yeah, I asked because, and I don't know if you've ever heard of anything like this in all of the conversations you've had, but one time my wife and I were driving from my grandparents, and they live up a canyon, and it was dark. I don't remember what time, but it was a little later, and we were driving up on this like bumpy dirt road surrounded by trees in the mountains, and right in front of us, as if like a deer was like crossing the road, there was this like giant beach ball sized orb that like kind of just floated right in front of us. It kind of like stopped and kind of like it was checking us out, and then it kept going. And I don't know, I always just wondered what that was, and if you've ever heard anything like that. I feel like I've heard sort of stories of maybe that is some sort of entity that's, looking to take people for experimenting, but I don't know.
Well, it sounds like a Merkabah, or a Merkabah, as someone might say. That it's so. If anyone who's familiar with the meditation world and the New Ageisms, and even in the Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticisms, they talk about the Merkabah or the Merkabah, where it's you when you're meditating, you sit in a certain pose, and then this energetic ball comes around you, and it's in the form of the two triangles, the one above you and then the one below you, and it's spinning at a rate, like the tops that the
Yeah, like a
a
dreidel,
dreidel, yeah,
type shape.
yeah, that it's spinning so fast that it takes your spirit away when you're meditating, so you can move your consciousness about in that way. So it could have been human that actually did that. And I don't want to say that all these different things are all abducting things. what I experienced is probably what the majority of Americans have experienced and don't have a clue about. It's the military doing this in conjunction with grays and manted beings. I did have an actual UFO sighting that I remember when I was like 14, but it started way before that. So, but when that happened, it was just weird because none of my friends that were with me remembered it happening. When like 2 days later, they were like, "That what are you talking about? That didn't happen." And I was like, "Huh, that was weird," because it just like it went by and it was moving in a weird way, and it
Yeah.
kind of reacted to us. You're getting the chills all
I
over.
know.
It kind of reacted to us and like stopped and like came towards us. But so I was looking down, rolling a blunt when this happened, and they were all looking at it, and they like tapped my shoulder and told me to look up. So I looked up, and then they didn't remember it. So I was thinking maybe when I was looking down, like they did that Men in Black, like
Yeah, they flashed them.
yeah. So I don't know if that happened, but it was interesting. None of them remembered, and I was like, oh yeah, I definitely remember that. That like you guys stopped me from rolling the blunt that we were about to smoke in order to look at this thing. So very weird.
Do you remember what it looked like specifically? Because I know you were talking about how was it the Merkabah? Is that how you say it? It has like the different shapes, but when I saw it, it was just like a gold glowing orb. There wasn't
Right,
really.
because it would be going so fast that's
Right.
what you would see is like a ball.
Okay.
Yeah, it would. So what you were saying, yeah, that would, like Mimi just said, it's spinning so fast that you can't tell it's
The
the two
shape.
triangles, that it just looks like a ball. But what I saw was your classic saucer shaped.
Yes, I wouldn't even say two triangles. It's like that geometric shape that's like a bunch of shapes.
Yeah,
Kind of all combined.
tetragrammaton
I
or
forget what it's
something.
called.
So
Tetrahedron.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what I saw was the saucer shaped. It had 3 distinct lights on it. I think it was like red, green, and yellow or something. That they were 3 distinct colors, and it was just a round, typical saucer shaped thing that was moving like a helicopter, completely silent, and had the lights on it that were similar to an airplane, but one of the colors was not one you would see on an airplane. Like I said, I think it was yellow. So it was just really strange in that sense. But other than that, it didn't really do anything. It was only like 15 seconds long, which is why it was so weird that my friends were saying, no, that didn't happen. But, now that I've recovered memories, I understand that it's a psyche thing that we shut off our memory so that because we remember when we see that ship, we're like, oh, I don't want to remember. It's so horrifying what happens to you that you don't want to remember. So then people just forget on purpose, essentially.
Right. So do you think that there's any sort of connection to Tartaria from like within whatever entities were sort of in control of that empire to the alien phenomenon that we see
Mhm.
today?
Oh, that is a
That's
great
a great
question.
question.
It is. I haven't had anyone ask that question, but yes, I absolutely do think that the abduction phenomena does have something to do with Tartaria. So Tartaria, in my opinion, is Tartarus, which, if anyone's familiar with the Bible or Enoch or the Greeks, Tartarus was the deepest, darkest depths of the abyss or Sheol. Sheol would be hell, as we know it. But so it comes from what we know as outer space. But like I was saying earlier, outer space doesn't exist in the way that we're told. Outer space, when we see the planets, they are the wandering stars that transgressed against humanity. They're the fallen angels, and they're locked in their chains around the sun because they're now made to worship the sun. That's their punishment for 10,000 years.
In the soul lure system?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So these beings, they were without life, or I'm sorry, without a physical form, and that may be the bottom of this place, like we were saying earlier, that we're in like a ball or an egg shaped thing. that may be the bottom of this. It may be the reverse of where we are and their projected consciousnesses. That's an idea I've been playing with recently. But anyway, they come into this place somehow, and they don't have physical bodies, so they come through our technology. Like, we're talking interdimensionally right now. We're manipulating time and space in order to be in front of each other. We do this with our cell phones, computers, and television screens. So when we're looking at a television screen, a computer screen, a cell phone, we don't know what dimension we're actually looking at. Are we looking at the inverse dimension that is below this place, like I was just saying, where they are projecting things here? Or are we looking at this place that, and I think it's an exact replica down there as it is up here. So Tartaria, the IA at the end of a word, the suffix IA means kingdom of. So the kingdom of Tartar, or the kingdom of Tartarus. So that is where they came to, and now they are being injected into people through graphene oxide, and now the graphene oxide takes over people, and they're different parasites as well. So this is why the heavy metals are in our food, our water, our oxygen, all of it, because that's what they use. What is poisonous for us is actually beneficial for them, and what's beneficial for us is poisonous to them. So they have to slowly kill off the natural world to bring in their metallic projection world, because they can't be here without a body, and they don't have bodies. So they take over our bodies and they change everything, and they get us to willingly do all of this, and they do it through the abduction phenomena in a big way. I mean, I was not the person that I am today because I was having things projected into me. Maybe you've heard of the voice of God technology, where yeah, well, it's way worse than that. I mean, they have made mass shooters all over the place. They have done that. They physically take over your body, and you are not in control, and you don't even know it. But people start to feel crazy because they're battling something, and they're being told that, no, that's not real. Take this pill. And what this pill does, it just kills the thought that this is crazy. And it's like, okay, just accept it. It's the pharmakeia, it's the witchcraft in order to get you to accept that the alien that is snatching your body is an okay thing, that it's not some it's some sci-fi thing that you saw on TV once, that it's not real. That's what they do to us.
Have you seen the show Stargate?
I have heard of it. We've seen one movie, Stargate Atlantis. We saw that was a pretty good one, but I'm familiar with Stargate SG-1 and all that.
Yeah, so I started watching it again last night because I'm actually going to be having Jim Wilhelmsen on the show
nice.
in like a week, and
He's great.
he had mentioned Stargate in a couple of his podcasts, so kind of wanted to talk about that with him, and just another synchronicity. So last night I'm watching this, and this scene comes up where Teal'c is talking about how the Goa'uld, which are basically a parasite entity, like in Earth, took over the human bodies, the primitive bodies, and started working within them. And they were called, I have this quote on here. I just took a picture of the screen, but it said, the Goa'uld discovered a millennia ago the Tari. And I just thought it was interesting. The Tari is like very similar to kind of what we're talking about with Tartaria.
Right.
So
slightly close name just to throw you off a little.
Right. But I mean, and maybe that was what they called the people, the Tari, of
Wow.
Tartaria. So I just thought that was interesting. And then I know you related a bunch of words in your blog about Tartaria and kind of the words that we have still in use today. And the one that came to mind for me was tarnation, right? Like, what in tarnation? And I looked up kind of like the meaning, and it was alternative to saying what in damnation.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't even know that. So you bringing this here, you're adding more pieces onto the puzzle for me.
Associated with Americans living in the South.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. And then go ahead.
The people of the South, who we're told are evil people, maybe it wasn't like what they told us at all, and maybe when they say what in
Man.
Tarnation, it's because the Northerners have already been taken over by these entities to some degree.
Right. I just thought it was fascinating that that's kind of the same story that we get from the Bible, right? It's saying essentially that God sent the messengers who sinned, put them in chains of gloom, cast them down to Tartarus. And
Yeah.
so it's very much like a damning of the fallen ones or the messengers.
Yeah, the
And
damnation.
yeah, and I wanted to point out that I have the comparisons here in the Bible. I was telling you about the YLT version, the Young Literal Translation, and that's where it actually says Tartarus, but in the other ones it just says hell. And there's several other words that they will use for hell, like Gehenna, I think is like another one, and they like translate them all as hell. So just for anyone listening, if you want to get a kind of more literal translation, I recommend at least comparing versions when you're reading. The Bible app makes it super easy to do that.
Yeah, and the Greeks are the ones who wrote the New Testament, and they have a lot of stuff about the Tartarus. So if anyone's interested in looking into Tartarus, I mean, you can just check out your ancient Greek history.
You know, what intrigues me is that you can hear that so many times. What in Tarnation? What in Tarnation? What in Tarnation? And you don't even think like, where the hell did that come from? Like, where did that word even come from? Nobody ever thinks about that.
Tarnation.
So what do you think is the most important thing for people to take, from this whole thing? Because, it covers so many different theories that people kind of pile into it. But like after doing this blog, do you think there's like one thing or a couple things that really stood out that are actually like helpful or useful to know?
So about Tartaria itself.
Yeah.
After you strip away the falsities, what's left?
Okay, well, so if you don't know anything of Tartaria, so there's different layers, I would say, for understanding. So if you don't know anything of it, I'd say that it's important just to understand that it's on maps, it's in history books, it's talked about in different places, that this was a real place. Start there and understand that this was a real place. Now, if you understand it's a real place, now what was this real place? All this old world architecture. It's not just over in Russia and Asia. It's everywhere, and it's very similar. And we're told in the mainstream narrative that it is warring nations. We'll take Georgia for example, that they'll say in the state of Georgia that several different countries were taking over here. Sweden, France, not France down here, but Sweden and Spain came down here, and they are using the same architecture, color coordinated, by the way. It's all the same stuff, but there's also France and England. Are all four of these countries are claimed to be doing this all up and down the East Coast, and that they're warring to conquer the world at this time. So why are they color coordinating everything together? What is it with all the different things? So that's the second layer. Now, if you're at an understanding of, okay, it was a place, there was old world architecture all around. So there's this free energy, and the cathedrals may be cathedrals, which is a very interesting thing, and get into cymatics and how the energy was being manipulated and used by everybody at some point. Okay, so that's another layer. Then beyond that, you start to look into, well, why is it being covered up? What is it about that's being covered up? And that leads you into the second destruction of the world, that according to the Bible, the second destruction of the world that would happen by fire has already happened in the 1700s and 1800s. That all of the prophecy has been fulfilled in the allotted time that the Bible said it would happen in. So not just that, but what was actually there that Tartarus came to interfere with was Christ's millennial kingdom, the 1,000-year reign of, I don't want to say peace on earth. Essentially, peace on earth was there for some of it, but that Satan, the adversary, was bound in the pit for 1,000 years, Tartarus. They were bound in actual Tartarus for 1,000 years, and then boop, popped up Tartarus on earth we call it Tartaria. So the kingdom of Tartarus came to earth after the 1,000 years. So there's a lot of ideas. Go ahead.
Do you think that it seems like on your globe that you showed us that Tartarus is kind of like at the top? Like, do you think that does it kind of reach up to Antarctica?
Well, Antarctica
kind of
is the
attached to
bottom.
Russia.
Or all
the way
yeah.
up. So it'd be like Hyperborea, maybe, where you're talking about the Arctic. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's theories about like hollow Earth, and maybe there's like a portal at the top or maybe at the bottom that connects, or something like that. I was just wondering if that was the case, if maybe that would be where Tartarus was established, like on our layer, right?
Like maybe a tourist field.
Oh yeah.
And maybe the tours, maybe they come out of the tourists and came from the north. That's a possibility for sure.
Yeah, super interesting. Kind of what you're talking about, just so people know, when you say destruction by fire, I think a lot of people would be like, well, how come I never heard of anything like that? But there is a unwieldy amount of buildings that are covered up. And I'll show some here, for example, just to give people an idea. So this brings up the topic of mud floods, right? And there's so many examples you can just find online of buildings that apparently have tons of layers underneath that they've started to excavate or whatever. And I mean, that definitely seems like at one point there was like another layer that we're unaware of, right?
Yeah, people were definitely not shipping in dirt to cover this up. Something else had to happen to cover this stuff up.
Right. And like you said, it sounds like, why wouldn't I hear about this? Why wouldn't my ancestors know about this? Well, I think that maybe the rapture probably occurred already, and that we are the result of being test tube babies, that we are the first resurrection, as it says in the Bible, that we're the ones who are here we're given a second chance and to accept Christ as God. We faced our punishment, and now we're here, and now we can either say, we're not going to Christ, and we'll take our chances with being judged, or that we accept Christ. So there's a big kind of thing that's happening. So anyway, well, like you were saying, what is the evidence of it? The mud flood is a great example, because there's a lot of mud everywhere, all over the world, in different areas, that are definitely covering up something. That we look at all these buildings, and they have windows that are built looking into mud, or doors that are built looking into mud. And you can look at so many cities across America that have this. All right, so that's a weird thing, right? The mud flood, like, people want to poo-poo the photos, so I don't even really use the photos as my evidence. What I look at is the major fires, and you're free to put up the photos, because I mean, I love looking at them. But when on the face of it, people, they want to say that that's not good enough.
Right. Well, yeah, that's why I want to give people a glimpse so they know. But yeah, I agree. There's more to it than just pictures.
Yeah. So you can look at every major American city, as well as around the world, that there were fires in all of them. Yeah. So
Like
that newspaper. So that newspaper article, it's the San Francisco fire in 1906, which actually we found that when we're in St. Augustine. We found that at a gift shop for the Fountain of Youth. Just like the crazy, why would that be there? The earthquake and fire of San Francisco. And San Francisco is famous for their streets being on slants, right?
Super big hills, super deep hills.
Mud floods. Maybe they're pyramids, actually, that they're that were melted. So
Chills all
What?
day.
Yeah. So you have that. There's fires all over. You have the World War Zero, if you will, because they don't call it World War One of 1812. You have the first and second Barbary Wars, which was America and Sweden, right when America was getting going in the 1770s as well as in the 1790s. That they fought the barbarians, the Barbary Wars, where they fought the Ottoman Empire that was in America still at that time, uh, which barbarians are Tartarians. They're calling them that because it's a derogatory name. They didn't like the Tartarians for whatever reason. So you have that. You also have the New Madrid Earthquake in 1812, which 1811 and 1812, and the final one in 1812 reversed the Mississippi River for 3 days. Hit in Missouri, right on the Mississippi River, and the Mormons actually, as this is a side note, the Mormons believe that Eden is in Jackson, Missouri. So, I mean, that sounds biblical to me that the Mississippi River was reversed. So that's a weird thing. Also, the Nile is very similar in shape and length to the Mississippi, and that actually runs reverse all the time. So that's another weird thing. Then we have the year without a summer. So it's the Bible's famous for saying the sun will be blackened out and the moon won't shine or will be red or whatever. Yeah, we had the volcano that exploded, and yeah, we had the year without a summer in 1816. I think the effects lasted for about 7 years or so, which is weird in itself. So you have a lot of different things happening. You have all the pestilence. You have the famine, disease out the wazoo. There's just so much evidence for it, but nobody's putting it together in this manner. And what you also have, which I know you have another photo of, is the meteor shower in 1833, November 12th, 1833, that people thought it was the end of the world because of this Leonid meteor shower that you just put up. The night stars fell 1833, in which more than 72,000, which it's some estimate up to 100,000 meteors per hour fell to Earth. And the stars are angels. So they probably came down and they raptured everybody up. That's just my opinion. Then we have.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
stop you on that just
Yeah.
because I had a question. I've heard you talk about that before about us being post rapture. What do you think is the devil's incentive for that lie to permeate?
For which one?
That like it, so if a lot of people would say we're not post rapture. I think a lot of
Okay.
people would say that. So like if we are post rapture, what do you think is the devil's incentive for that deception?
So that we don't think Christ is actually God, so that we think that there's multiple Christ throughout our history, that it's the same thing is happening over and over on larger and smaller scales, and that Jesus isn't the one true living God. So I really think that is it. Because
Yeah.
once we accept them, then we're saved, and then it's over for us. I've been saved. I have reached salvation, and I was in bliss nirvana for 10 straight days because of it. So, I mean, for me, the war's over. And once people come to that realization, then the war's over for them as well.
Yeah, and I don't really know where I stand on post or pre-rapture or any of that, but kind of my thoughts on it too, when I started thinking that way, is I feel like it kind of takes away the urgency from people if they think we're not post-rapture, because it's like, oh, well, I still have a second chance if I don't get
Right.
raptured, right? So it's like,
And
they're
they
like
tell you about
last chance.
reincarnation.
Yeah, there's a lot of lies that I think kind of can feed off of that. So I think that's a good point. I also think, the Bible talks about how essentially the kingdom of heaven will be here once everybody knows, right? And so I think it is kind of us bringing heaven to earth through Christ in us, and that's when
Yes.
heaven will be on earth. I mean, maybe it will be some sort of physical manifestation through the clouds, but yeah, I think the whole rapture thing can kind of sidetrack people from that.
Yeah, I'm not too solid in the rapture happening, or if Tartarus was Satan being loose on the earth for a short season, because there is also evidence that uh, Satan is still being loosed or is about to be loosed. There's a weird thing with 9/11, 2001. If there's 1,000 years that's been added to our timeline, then 9/11 2001 would be 9/11 1001. Jesus' birthday is probably 9/11. So 1,000 years later would be Satan would be loose from the pit. So there's a lot of different weird things, and I don't really, like I said in the beginning, I'm fluid with my thinking. I know these are all possibilities, and there's where there's evidence, that's what I follow. So I don't hold on to anything too strongly. I just go with when I get more evidence of something that one thing can't be true, then I let go of that, and then I just kind of gain more evidence for what could be true still. So I'm not sure exactly, where we stand on the biblical timeline, but the 1859 Carrington event is a very strange occurrence to me. That and there you go. You got slides left and right. You're on it, my friend. So yeah, the Carrington event was the most intense geomagnetic storm in recorded history, occurring on the 1st and 2nd of September 1859 during solar cycle 10. And it was so powerful that people who were working on the telegraph system were actually shocked. And if it happened today, our whole technology, our whole grid would be gone because it was so strong.
I found it interesting that this center photo here is one of the main ones that kind of comes up when you search this. And I don't know, to me, that literally looks like a serpent. It's got
Yeah,
the
it
diamond
does.
Parasitic
head.
to me for sure.
Yeah. And I think I heard you say something about, you kind of had a theory that maybe this was the event that uh, the devil, the deceiver, was loosed upon the earth.
Yeah, I think that
So
was
I
a
just found that
switcheroo.
interesting when I saw that photo. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it,
Where's that
and like
photo
you were
from?
saying, I think the Carrington, I forget his name, but I think he sort of came
Richard
up with
Carrington.
this. He came up with this diagram or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's like the main image that comes up when you search it. So yeah, I just thought that was super ironic and interesting. And I do feel like there's some sort of involvement with this deceiver parasitic entity and our technology, and that is around the time that we kind of had a lot of that going on, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's that first picture on the left there that's a scary looking sky, and it's in like the backdrop of a World's Fair almost. You have the Ferris
Yeah.
wheel, you have the clock tower, you
Big
have
Ben
this
there.
big spire in the front. I mean, this is, if anyone's unfamiliar with, this is the type of old world architecture that you can look for uh in your city. That you can find these spires, you can find these clock towers all over that have been standing for a long time. Yeah, these are some great photos you just brought up. These World's Fairs, and this is really the smoking gun for me. This is what broke me when I heard Howdy McCoskey talk about the World's Fairs and how it's completely covered up. And I just got to speak to him the other day, last week.
Yeah, great interview.
Yeah, great convo. If everyone hasn't heard it, go check it out.
Yeah, I mean, that might go down as my favorite interview of all time. And I'm getting such good feedback on it. He said to me that I could go around doing interviews for him because I know the material so well. So, that was one of the highlights of my podcasting career so far. Him and Matt Tarion from the Great Deception podcast in the same day. I mean, that's just some great stuff. So, this World's Fairs, I mean, it's nonsense. The whole thing is really, it's racist, and it's set up to deceive people. It was television and movies before television and movies, and it was real life theater where they had human zoos, they had infantoriums. Not too long afterwards, we had these orphan trains. So these are all the things that we didn't mention yet that go into my thinking of the rapture occurring and us being test tube babies and the switcheroo, as I think the Carrington event was, where all these saints that are depicted in the Catholic tradition have these halos around their head. I think that they were probably humans that started to reach their eternal form, and you could see their crown chakras opened, and they were depicted as halos. And that there was some kind of switcheroo where the demons came in and the saints went out. And Mimi just got the chills again. So, so that's kind of what I think happened in 1859, because 1851 was like the first. Well, I think 1850 was like the first real big World's Fair, but it was right around there is when it started. Shortly after that 1833 event where all the stars fell to earth, maybe they were some of the fallen angels.
And the idea that you knocked around about Disney being like a
permanent World's
permanent World's Fair
Yeah.
here, you know, like, whew.
That's definitely like the next evolution of the World Fairs for sure.
Yeah, I mean they're everywhere and they just suck you dry.
And Disney
know,
does it through
yeah.
TV and movies all the time.
Oh yeah,
too.
it's that whole rabbit hole is. I mean,
Yeah,
it's very
that's a new
evident for
one.
me. For
Yeah.
if anyone hasn't heard, like, you should look into Disney and kind of some of the programming and
Well,
psychology that goes into a lot of their movies, because
super dark.
I definitely don't want
Ugh.
my kids watching them.
Yeah.
I know, and my daughter like loves Disney, and she's about to have a baby, and she's just like, I want all the Disney books, and I'm like, no, no,
It's a tough
what
one.
did I
People look at
do?
you. I mean, it is a
What
cult.
did I
Like,
do?
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, so the World Fairs, and it is interesting how you can go into pretty much, I mean, most people's towns. Like, I know we have a big building here where I am. It's remnants from the World Fair. And I guess what would you say is the connection to Tartaria? Because that was always something that kind of I was confused about. Is it their recycling architecture, or just
So-
the people involved are kind of up to their old tricks?
Right. So what happened was they presented this architecture. So if we think that just Tartaria was just this one part, Tartaria is an umbrella term now, but it was only one part of the world. So this under this umbrella, it describes all this beautiful old world architecture. So what the World's Fairs were doing, where they were displaying all this beautiful architecture, and they told us, so this is why it's so unbelievable, is that they tell us that it's made of plaster and wood, which is also known as staff. The plaster is known as staff, and that afterwards they either burned it or they blew it up with dynamite. But they say that they built it in 2 years. All of these different things that are like so large. I don't even remember the numbers that Howdy rambled off, but just ridiculously sized things that there's no way people could make these things of plaster. So what it was, in my opinion, is they were actually displaying the old world architecture, which is all Greek or Greco-Roman as we know it. So why is there Greco-Roman architecture all over the place? That's very weird, right? So they were displaying it, and then they were just amazing all the humans, and then they just got rid of it. They did away with it, and that is how it goes up. It's the cover up. They were saying that they made it in 2 years. Like the planning would take
Yes.
more than 2 years, and they said they planned it in a month. The landscaping would take more than 2 years, and they said they did it in 3 months. It's just ridiculous amounts of things that are completely impossible.
When I'm looking back at my notes from our conversation with Howdy, it was like 700 acres, 250 buildings in less than 2 years.
And
that's the Chicago World's Fair.
Yeah, and when Chicago's World's Fair came out, it was 400 years after Columbus had reached America, and that big old statue in the Chicago, anyone looks up Chicago World Fair, is Columbia. is the Greek goddess Columbia. Her name is also there. It was right there on the top right. That this is Columbia, aka Lady Liberty. So what was actually happening in the 400 years we know from Michael Wan's work. If you guys aren't familiar with him, I suggest everybody check him out. Michael Wan, he breaks down that they do these magic rituals in cycles of 400 for some reason. So this was 400 years after Columbus landed. And I mean, it's just all of it is just a cover up to what was here, and they showed it to us and then they took it away by a fire.
Yeah, and this is where they really started to set the stage for the future that they wanted to build, right? It seems like they had a lot of sort of stories of what the future is going to look like, of technology. That it seems like they tried to push a lot of like Darwinism and how
Does that remind you of something? Does that remind you of Epcot at all?
Yeah, exactly. And they're definitely just continuing that cycle. But to me, the biggest calling card is the torch, right? That's like the sign for Prometheus or for Lucifer bringing down knowledge from the gods. And I don't know, I always see that like at the Kanye and Drake show concert. I don't know if you saw that, but like they opened up with like the torch at the top, the Olympic Games.
Does that? Yeah.
Where's that photo from on the left there? Do you know?
I wish I knew which specific World Fair it was. I don't off the top of my head, but I'm sure if you search World Fairs, you'll be able to find it and see which one specifically it was.
Yeah, it looks like a Hindi god on the right here. I mean, I don't know who that is, that statue, but that looks like it could be one of the Hindi goddesses.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different kind of beings that are portrayed throughout the World Fairs, for sure.
Yeah.
None of which are.
Well, and the thing is, if I'm correct with my destruction of the world, according to fire, what would have happened was this year without a summer would have sucked out so much oxygen that things would have shrunk. As soon as the oxygen wasn't there, the things that were larger would have died off, plants, animals, and humans. And this is why the megafauna died off. When Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock talk about comets hitting the Earth to end the Younger Dryas or to begin the Younger Dryas, that I don't think it was way back then. I think it was just not too long ago. And that what would happen is it would be very hot also. So it would kill off all these things and it would be very hot. But then as soon as the fire went out, then it would freeze all automatically. And okay, there you go, the Younger Dryas. And
I was going to ask you if you had heard about this, the Younger Dryas black mats. Yeah.
That's how I got into my awakening, was through ancient civilizations, thinking Göbekli Tepe was a real thing 13,000 years ago, and that they purposely covered up, but no, it's the mud flood covered it up, and it wasn't all that long ago. There's actually a time period from like I think 1300 or 1200 to about 1500 where they say there was a cold climate change, that it was a very cold period for us, that there was a warming period followed by a freezing period. So if something were to become very hot and then freeze all of a sudden and things didn't have enough oxygen, then they would be turned into rock. So I think a lot of these statues, maybe not a lot of them, some of these statues could have been these actual lowercase g gods that have been stuck in the rock now, because they were, the oxygen was depleted and the cooling happened so quickly that they were just turned into rock.
Which is kind of the story of, was it Sodom and Gomorrah, when
Lot's wife?
When Lot's wife looks back and turned into a pillar of salt.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Medusa, where you stare at her and then you become rock.
Yeah, so there's definitely, history or at least mythology around that. Yeah. So do you think that this Younger Dryas black mat is evidence of that sort of transitional period, but not the age that we're sort of told. Like maybe it was a lot sooner than 12,850 years ago.
Well, see, it's hard to say because apparently at Atlantis, we're told Atlantis ended around that time period as well through Plato. But who knows if that's even real? Who knows if Plato was a real person? Once you start to uncover this Tartaria stuff, you can't really know anything beyond 250 years ago or 200 years ago, essentially. But I like to start around the 1770s through our mainstream history because they do, it's free will. They have to kind of tell us everything. So beyond that, I don't know how time actually operates. Is it that they've been resetting us to the 1800s several times, that every 250 years or so that we just get reset back to that time period? I don't know. It's a strange thing where you have the Great Winter Frost in 1741 in Ireland, where it was just like frozen over. You also have the Philadelphia experiment that happened. There's a lot of things that are very weird in our history that if you start linking them together, that, oh, maybe they time traveled from this time period to that time period, caused the Great Frost and reset all of humanity back then. Because right after that is when Adam Weishaupt was born. Also, the Rothschilds were born around then in the 1740s. So when we start talking about 13,000 years ago, I'm like, well, I'm not there. I can't go there anymore. That's how I started my awakening, was looking into ancient civilizations, but I can't go there anymore. And the more work that I uncover, like Anatoly Fomenko. So when I said the 1,000 years earlier, that's not my idea. That is Anatoly Fomenko, who's a Russian mathematician who has figured out these algorithms and different math equations that are way above my pay grade to understand how they operate. But he's saying that there's phantom time hypothesis, that there's these phantom events that didn't actually happen, that they're just copied in history from one point in history laying over another, that maybe the Old Testament happened after the New Testament. That's a strange idea to me. But he also thinks that like the Noah's Ark and Christopher Columbus event were the same thing, which that kind of makes more sense because Christopher Columbus definitely didn't happen.
How those maps overlaid.
There's a lot of weird stuff. And
there's some maps that overlay like the Nile River with, the Mississippi River and weird stuff, but it matches like exactly.
Yeah, California used to be had the Red Sea, and that's how you have Salt Lake City, because the Red Sea was the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. So Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, they weren't there the way they were, and the water was depleted during this gold rush where they were pumping water out to find gold, and they weren't actually uncovering gold. They were uncovering mansions out there, and that's why people were rushing out there. But there's so many different things to this time thing that I'm like, okay, well, I know time isn't linear. We just experience it in a linear fashion. And so when we're looking at all these events and time and all that, it's really hard to say. And I have come up with the idea, and it's not my idea, I don't think. I think God has kind of given me this idea that time started at Christ's resurrection, that was day one, essentially, that is when time started, and that we end up getting so far away from it. We're 500,000 years away in perfect society in what we know as Atlantis, and it's beautiful, so beautiful that then we forget everything, and then we start to go downwards, and what ends up happening is we forget that Jesus Christ is our creator, and then we kill him. Because he's telling us, no, you're doing things wrong. And we're like, no, we're not doing things wrong. We've been doing it this way for the last 1,000,000 years. What are you talking about, weird guy? And then we kill him. And then time starts over. So I think that may be, and my ear just went completely deaf, ringing when I said that. So I don't know if that's a good sign or not, but I think that the year his resurrection was the beginning of time. Did you just get the chills?
Have you not been? I've been like getting the chills this whole time. And there's no draft in here. There's no
And
anything.
she's not on drugs
Usually
or
I
coffee
sit
either.
here. Lately, I've been putting a heating pad behind me so that, like, I wouldn't get the chills per se, but I still get them.
Yeah, it's
Well,
just
we must
what
be
I.
on to something then.
Yeah,
It's weird.
So,
I'll get like little ones that you can't
Talking to,
see
like-
me. You can't see me like do this. I'll get little ones and I don't say anything. I just shut my eyes for a second and like
shake your head.
I just log the information for myself.
So to answer your question, 13,000 years ago, I don't know. I can't really make an accurate opinion on it. It could just be reset after reset after reset after reset, and it could add up to 13,000 years ago. At this point, it could have been that many resets, but I don't know.
right. Well, I think it's one of the interesting things I found when looking into the Younger Dryas black mats was that in this photo, and it might be kind of hard to see, I'll try to make it more full screen, but there's like a line here or an area where it's freshwater deposits, and then you have up above it the more black mat Younger Dryas that supposedly was by comets or some sort of other more like fire related
Yeah, it looks like a
incident
burn
that
of
followed
some
that,
sort.
right, that, and then that followed by the freezing period you were talking about, which sort of created that layer. So we talk about a lot of hypotheticals, but here is some sort of evidence to what we're talking about as far as the timeline goes, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of weird stuff like the Sphinx, the weathering on the Sphinx shows that it's definitely not from the time period that we're told, that it's from when there was actually rain there. But again, I can't go there with time, knowing how manipulated everything has been.
Well,
And there,
with time, let's say time is being manipulated and stuff, wouldn't it still make our present time in accordance to however it was manipulated? Does that make any sense? So like if somebody went and manipulated time, wouldn't how we're perceiving things be affected by that?
Well, do you ever feel that like certain days feel longer than others? Sometimes,
definitely-
and some days seem like they go by so fast, and you're like, where did the day go?
Yeah, for sure. And I think time is a funny thing, and there's definitely realms outside of time. But as we're experiencing it, like you said, it is linear in how we perceive it. So I guess what I'm getting at is if someone was to manipulate our timeline and let's say cause a catastrophe to happen or something like that, wouldn't that still affect how we're perceiving it in this present moment?
well, it certainly could. So the reason why I say I don't know how long ago it was is because, so say something happened in the year 1200. Say we are actually in the year 2022, and something happened in the year 1200, right? From the year 0 to 1200. Then we get to 1800. Then how many times have we gotten reset to 1800? Has it been 1,000 or 10 times to get to 1,000 years, or 2,000 years that we've been reset? So now that the 1200 actually archaeologically says that it was 2,800 years ago, but it was only actually a few hundred years ago. We just been reset so many times. So that's where
Right. Okay. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah. And the weird thing I was going to say about the Sphinx and the pyramids, mainstream narrative Bible tells us that the Jews in Jerusalem, what we know as Jerusalem, were the slaves in Egypt 4,000 years ago. We're told in mainstream Egyptian history that the slaves of the Egyptians built the pyramids in Egypt. And there's no mention of that in the Bible ever. So the Jews who were the slaves of the Egyptians would have been the ones that built the pyramids, and they never mention it ever, the Sphinx or the pyramids.
Do you think they would have referred to them as pyramids? I mean, I guess they would have maybe alluded to it being some massive
earthen beam.
structure, but they do talk about them building blocks and such like that. So I'm just wondering if maybe they just didn't call them pyramids.
Well,
Perhaps. I mean, I don't
that's
know.
no, that's definitely a good point. But the Sphinx is there's no talk about that, and that's a pretty uh, outlier, if you will. But I have someone sent me some evidence that maybe it's Mount Zion, that the pyramids are Mount Zion. But to me, I don't think that Israel was over in the Middle East. I think that America is Israel and Egypt and Rome and Babylon, and all of it was actually in the Americas.
Well, it'd be fun to read Exodus at some point, maybe in our future Bible study, and kind of go
Yeah.
through that. But
Yeah, I can't wait to get that going. I just, when I'm called to do it, I will do it. I think I should probably finish the Gospels myself first, and
yeah, for sure.
I'm almost there.
Have you given in any more thought? I know. Could you elaborate a little bit on your sort of thesis of John? Was it John that you said was maybe Jesus or something to that matter?
Yeah. So John the Baptist in the Gospel of John, he's recording himself becoming Christ. And when I opened the Bible and started reading it, that was the first book that I read. And what I'm doing now, it was the first book that I read. And I was like, oh, okay, I could write this for myself because I was born Todd Armstrong. So I didn't even tell your audience this. I have a wild past of being in prison, being a drug addict, being a very overall bad person. I couldn't speak. I was overweight. I was balding. I had a ton of addictions. And now I've gotten rid of all of that by Jesus Christ saving me and renaming me Immanuel Kingman. And it was only about 2 months ago where I found out that there was a thing called being written into the book of life and having your name changed. I didn't know that was a thing when this happened to me last January. January to March is essentially when I was renamed. So I didn't know that was a thing. So there were so many different things that occurred like that to me that I experienced biblical things, and then I found out it was in the Bible. So when I read the book of John and I see he's saying things like, you can, he's recording that Jesus Christ is saying, you can only come to me through the Father. He's saying, you can only get to my level by God personally doing this for you, because God has personally done this for me. And I have all these crazy psychic abilities now that you can only get it through God. There's no, like, people ask me like how to become psychic, and I can help people tune into it, but there's no way that anyone could just develop these on their own. It is only through the hand of God that it can happen, all these different things. So there's different things like that, like Elijah, when John is asked, are you Elijah? And he says no, but then Jesus says yes, because the Christ in him knows that, yes, the Christ in me is the same Christ that was in Elijah. But
so do you think that Jesus was still like a physical person, but they were experiencing Christ within them? Because it does seem like John talks about, I think it's, John 3:27, where it says, John answered and said, a man is not able to receive anything if it may not have been given him from the Father. Ye yourselves do testify to me that I said, I am not the Christ, but that I am having been sent before him.
right.
So it seems like John is saying that, like, he's not Jesus, he's not the Christ, but he's obviously working with Christ within him.
Right.
I feel, to me, I see that as his awakening.
Yeah, so I could see that as
Christ in him, like you said,
Todd
rising.
Todd Armstrong was sent before Immanuel Kingman.
Right.
So I can see that, but so there's this anomaly happening, because I think that multiple people were becoming Christ at once, and that's why this book, or this New Testament, was rushed. That in the Old Testament, it seems that it was a time period of one prophet, maybe two or three, but generally speaking, it was a time period of one, and then another, and then another, and then the New Testament happens, and you have what, like 28 books written within like 100 years or so, or like a time period of 100 years or so. So why would that be? What's the significance? I think many people were becoming Christ all at once, but I also do think that there was Jesus Christ, the essence, the energy. So when I say that, I'm not discounting Christ. Anyone that's listening, Christ, when he says, drink of my blood, eat of my flesh, he's talking about the life essence that he is. If you drink of my blood and you eat of my flesh, you'll never go thirsty. You'll never need anything else again. You'll never go hungry, because it's the oxygen that you're pulling in. It's the life essence you're pulling from the energy. So he's saying different things like that. So I see it as this centralized figure that we're all extensions of. We are the body of Christ. We are like the dimensional layer that sticks out all the way outwards from the centralized figure. So I think that maybe that centralized figure probably did incarnate at some point on the earth. Now, I don't know about the Virgin Mary birth part of it. Maybe Christ just appeared here as man. Maybe John was actually Mary's son, and John was the one that was sent ahead of time. I'm still trying to really work that out between reading the Bible and talking to Jesus about these different things. So
is there something that makes you question the virgin birth? Because to me, when I read the Bible, it does seem like there was a physical person who was kind of leading the charge and making people wake up. And that's kind of why I think you see a lot more writing in that time, because there was somebody driving that force here on earth, because we weren't able to connect with the Holy Spirit until he ascended and the Holy Spirit came down to replace him as the spirit on earth versus the physical carnation.
right,
At least that's kind of how I see it.
Right. I kind of, so I don't have a problem with the virgin birth. I'm just saying I don't know. I think because John was the one that was leading it. John was doing the baptisms before Jesus ever showed up, right? He was doing the physical baptisms, but then all of a sudden, nobody wanted to come to John for a physical baptism. They wanted to come to Jesus for a spiritual baptism. Nobody wants to talk to Todd Armstrong. People want to talk to Immanuel Kingman. Why is that? Because Todd Armstrong was some caveman that was locked in the matrix system, but Immanuel Kingman has all this grand knowledge that he can lead the way. He's led my podcast for me. He has changed my life completely, as we were saying, with my daughter, with Mimi, with myself, everything. That it's Immanuel Kingman does spiritual baptisms. It's not Todd Armstrong that's actually doing any of that stuff. And it's weird to talk about yourself in that manner, but it's not myself that's actually talking. It's a weird kind of thing, a transitionary period. So I think John was leading the way, but I do also think that at some point there was a physical person here named Jesus, because when Thomas was doubting that it was him, he put his fingers through the holes that he was his hand holes that he was resurrected in, which is why we have chakra centers or energy centers in our hands and feet are from the or from Jesus being hung on the cross. People before us, they didn't have that before Jesus did that. So I think Yeshua was the one who was hung on the cross. I think he was the head of Christ. So between Yeshua and John, I don't know really what the answer is yet, but I know that there's something there. I have experienced this Jesus figure. So when I say Jesus Christ, a lot of people that they say Yeshua. Yeshua to me is the Son. Yahweh is the Holy Spirit, and Jesus Christ is the Father. He is the combination of the two. And this is possible for all of us, that Jesus Christ is the combination of our lower self and our higher self, and he's in the middle giving life to both of them.
Can I comment on that real quick? So I don't remember exactly when. I think I actually commented this in the chat on one of your podcasts, but there's a verse where Jesus, as we read it in the Bible, talks about like, why do you call me good? I'm not good. It's the Father like working in me. So I guess if Jesus Christ is the Father, wouldn't that be sort of counter that passage?
So when they're saying Jesus, so what would happen if I'm talking and I'm saying Immanuel, right? But it's actually me saying it, but I'm not saying I because I have to distinguish between the two, right? So if John was talking about himself, but talking about the Christ in him, and he's saying Jesus, then that's how. And I don't even know where that passage, which book that's in that you're saying. So who would be saying it? I don't know, but it's this thing of everybody doesn't want to be seen as themselves. People, when they give themselves over to Christ, they don't want to be known as their name. They want to be known as Christ. Come through me, use me. I want you to only see him. These are common Christian sayings. So I think people were really doing that to the point where they were kings on earth and they were saying, he's my king. That's why they called him the King of Kings, because all the kings on earth were saying, no, he's my king. And they're all claiming that Jesus Christ is doing these things through them, so that they're not taking credit for it, because people of Christ don't want to take the credit. They don't want to be known. They would rather just go about their business, just being people, doing God's work. But if someone's going to ask, well, it's Jesus Christ that's doing this. So if it's Jesus Christ doing it here, and it's Jesus Christ doing it where you are, and it's Jesus Christ doing it where this guy is, and it's Jesus Christ doing it where this guy is, well, guess what? Well, I think Jesus Christ is probably a real thing, and he's doing all these miracles in all these places, and all these people are claiming this one name all at the same time. So I do think that there was one centralized figure that was doing most of this stuff, and Yeshua. And like I was just about to get to, I see in my third eye, I have very powerful visions, prophetic visions, if you will. And I see, when I read the Bible at certain times, when I think about Jesus in a very intense way, I see a being who was much larger than all the other humans around, and that this is why he had to walk with the cross, because it was really no problem for him, because he was very large. And they hung him on the cross, and he died, I guess, on the cross after 6 hours, and then he resurrected on the third day. And how that resurrection happened, maybe it was just the spirit coming through other human bodies at the time, because he was given authority over heaven and earth, so that he could just appear through anybody at any time, especially people who are willing followers of him. That's why the gardener, they didn't notice it was him until he left, because his essence was so powerful and intoxicating that they didn't know that it was him until they were without it. Just like I was in bliss for 10 days. I didn't know while I was in bliss, I was experiencing it. It was when I wasn't in bliss that I'm like, oh, there was something there that isn't here now. So that's how I think that a lot of them felt when Jesus would arrive in their presence. And then it was once he was gone, they recognized that he was there. So there's a lot of mystery wrapped in all of this, but I do think it was literal. I just don't understand exactly how it was literal, because I think it was more than one man, but I do also think it was one centralized figure. And I think John specifically was talking about himself. Now, maybe Matthew, Mark, and Luke are talking about this one centralized figure, which I'm trying to, uncover now as I finished Matthew and I'm in Mark at the moment. So
that was Mark 10:18, by the way, the verse I was referring to, where it says, "Why do you call me good?" Jesus answered, "No one is good except God alone."
Okay.
And I don't know, personally, it doesn't really matter as much. I think the importance is that you recognize Christ and you invite him into your life. At least for me, that's when I've had the most peace after searching everywhere else. And
Mhm.
it sounds like that's the same for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think it's interesting. I do think it seems to me like a lot of people were referencing Jesus as, like a physical person. Seems like John was saying, I baptize with water, but Jesus who comes after me will baptize in fire. Like there's a lot of different I feel like quotes where people are talking about separately, even though, because if John is baptizing like in the authority of Jesus, wouldn't he have already sort of had that transformation?
Well,
That's kind of
yeah. So, like, I'm going through that transformation now, right? So it was, uh, we don't know how old John was, but he was 6 months older than Jesus, right? So he was just ahead of Jesus, what they're saying. So if I like, why did John even start baptizing? That's a question in itself. How did he know to start baptizing? Uh, why were people coming to him? Is another big question. Yeah, because he was already transitioning. He just didn't know it.
Well, I thought in the beginning he wasn't
Get in the mic.
technically known as baptizing. He wasn't technically known as John the Baptizer. I think he was, in a way, cleansing people, but the term baptizer didn't come until way later.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but it wasn't just something that everybody was doing or just anybody was doing. So
No.
when he says those things, I understand, I can relate to it because I could say the same thing for myself, that I baptize in water, but Immanuel Kingman baptizes and I do spiritual baptisms. That's the main thing that I do on my website is spiritual baptisms, that Christ had me put down and was like, this is what you're going to do. And the way I do it is through Christ. And it's, I mean, there's different interpretations. And like you said, I think that that's a very likely possibility, what you're saying. But also I see it that it's more than just one. So it's hard for me to get a grasp on it right now. So like when I say it's literal, like John is literal, he's being literal by saying, yeah, I baptize by water, but Christ baptizes by fire. He's being literal. He's just, it's hard to put into words for other people to understand. So if you haven't really gone through the transformation, it's not as easy to recognize, I'll say.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic and one I would love to also get into in the Bible study at some point.
Yeah, I
But
can't wait to do the Bible study because I mean I'm not all that studied on the Bible, so I can't wait to talk to people like you and others like you who have a great depth of knowledge on the Bible.
yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it. Let me know when you're ready to get that going. Another question that I had for you was, I've heard you talk about the sort of serpent and chopping off its head spiritually. What do you think? First of all, what do you think that is specifically? Do you think it's everyone has that spirit when they're born? Is it something that attaches itself to them? And then my follow-up question is, why do you think we have to just chop its head off instead of completely getting rid of it?
Okay, so before I answer that, are you familiar with Ophiuchus, the astrological sign?
I'm not, no.
Okay, so he's the 13th sign. So there were 12 signs in astrology up until I don't even know how long ago, not that long ago. Ophiuchus was added in, and Ophiuchus, the symbol of Ophiuchus is the man holding the serpent. So it's a very strange thing, and it's also, that's when my birthday is in Ophiuchus, and it's only a few days long. So it's a strange thing, but so I will say that I've been destined to do this. Um, so what I do, which Mimi can attest to, because she did it for herself, as she heard me talk about it so many times, she was able to do it, and I actually watched her do it in the astral realm when we were meditating together. It was quite beautiful. Actually, I wasn't allowed to. I was about to cut the head off of her snake, and her higher self said, no, let her do it. And then I watched her do it. So what happens? Are we all born with this? To some degree, we are, because we are the combination of the serpent seed that was here before Adam and Eve and the line of God, who is Adam and Eve. His line and the other line were a combination. So some people may be 95% serpent and 5% Adam and Eve, and some people may be 95% Adam and Eve and 5% serpent. And I don't know that those percentages are accurate, but to some degree, in between 1 and 99% this way, 1 and 99% the other way, we are all both, because we all have the Spirit of Christ within us, and this is the purpose of Eve. Of God knew Eve would sin because he was not okay with it, but it was part of the plan, because he needed
permissible will versus perfect will. That's kind of how I've heard that explained.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because he needed to call everybody back to heaven, and the only way he could do that is by giving them all the blood of Christ, washed by the blood. So we could really only do that by having everybody have some of the blood, enough of the blood in them to be recalled. So depending on how much of the serpent seed you have in you, depends on how large your kundalini may be. Now, also, you may only have a little bit of serpent seed in you, but you may have fed the beast within you, as people in the spiritual community may know. You feed the beast by giving into your sins, by just doing things that you shouldn't be doing, and you can grow it. So why I cut the head off is because, and this really blew me away. I never had thought of this. I had Truth Seeker on my podcast. I didn't even know about this until way after I was only cutting the heads off. He said to me, well, he was going over the symptoms of people who have the Holy Spirit in them and people who have the Kundalini rising, and it's the same exact thing. So I'm like, oh, okay. I can see why I only cut the head off, is because it is still the spirit. It is the spiritual energy, whether it's the serpent doing it or whether it's Christ, it's spiritual energy. So why I cut the head off is because it's energy. It can't be taken out of you. It's spiritual energy, but I can stop that thing from having its own way with you, that it has a mind of its own, and I can cut the head off of it so that it doesn't have a mind of its own anymore, so that you can use that spiritual energy and have these spiritual gifts for yourself. A lot of people who are psychically gifted, they give into this energy. So this isn't, if you're talking like your average Christian, I'll say, probably who's been a lifelong Christian, who hasn't really done anything wrong, hasn't had a really bad life or anything, they're not going to have a big kundalini in them, but they can still have the Holy Spirit in them a lot. But they won't need my help for doing this, because they have a grasp on things. But somebody who has spiritual gifts, who's had a very rough, traumatic life, and now they have all these spiritual gifts all of a sudden, they may be unknowingly feeding this thing by doing psychedelics, by smoking weed, by there's so many different things we can do that we don't even know we're doing. Magical stuff, ritual stuff, astrology. I don't even want to say just astrology, but those types of things that we do, we don't know that we're feeding the serpent that way. And when you cut the head off the snake, then you can start to see clearly that where you actually get your power from. And it's not from the kundalini, because the kundalini always misleads us. It brings us in a direction that isn't the full truth. It'll trick you. It'll get you some stuff that there's no way you could possibly know all that stuff, and you'll give into it more and more because you think that you have to do more to get more accurate, because I'm only 70% right, and I can do more. I can give over to myself more. I can have more crystals. I can burn more incense. All these different things that we tell ourselves. And I'm not saying those things are inherently evil, but
But if you're giving power to that versus giving your life to Christ, right?
right.
And
Well,
it's
yeah, I don't even know if I think it's more of just a trick, and it's just really just feeding. You're feeding the Kundalini. I don't think that like I was just
It's
saying,
a
those.
distraction.
Well, I don't
it's
even think that the
imitation.
distraction feeds it. I think that your intention going into those things that aren't of Christ feeds it. But
It's an
I think,
idol at the end of the day, right? Like it's a
yeah,
physical object that you're giving
Right.
power to
Power
versus
to.
giving your power up,
right.
essentially, is kind of how I look at it.
But I
Yes.
do think that if you're solid in Christ, that you can do those things, and it's not going to have the same effect. You're not going to be feeding something evil, as long as you are solid with Christ and you're talking to Christ and figuring out different things, and always bringing all your questions to Him through prayer and meditation, and just over and over, repeatedly looking for the answers of asking this, so you have a solid answer. Now, it doesn't mean everyone can do it, but I don't think that those things are necessarily bad, but somehow it does, like you're saying, maybe it's this idol thing, but it does feed this serpent that's within you. You're giving over to it more and more and more. So I just come in, I cut the head off, and everybody can keep their spiritual gifts and they can do what they do. But now they are free to see what is actually happening. And now Christ. So I don't just cut the head off the snake, but I cut the head off the snake and I bring in Jesus Christ. That when we're meditating, I'm basically, I put someone else inside of my body, and now I can feel everything that you're feeling in your body, and I can send Jesus Christ to the parts of you that really need it. Like somebody that I worked on had Krampus. If you're familiar with Krampus, popped up, and turned out that Krampus was in this person's life at some point, in a very physical sense, but not the monster Krampus, but just uh, someone who dresses up like Krampus. So it was a very weird thing, and I didn't even know Krampus looked this way when it happened. So there's a lot of weird things like that happen, and I say that to say that I'm not sure what's going on when this happens. I just kind of explore the imaginative world that surrounds the person that I'm working with, and I can cut the Kundalini off. I can give them their energy, and I can send Christ in there, and then everybody's always at peace for the next few days at least after a session. That they always tell me how wonderful they feel the very next day, and it's like they've been freed from something that they didn't know was there, and it's really a good process for them. But the most important part is the follow-up stuff, that everyone's doing their part to make contact with Jesus Christ himself, to become one with Christ and do his will, and purify themselves in whatever way that they may need to.
So that all makes sense, and that's great. So when you're saying you remove the head, are you like leaving part of the serpent still in them? I guess that's where I get
So this is where you
confused.
explain how you plug it
I mean,
back in.
Okay, yeah. So what happens?
Okay.
I take the serpent, and so it starts in like
So this is the part I remember doing to myself.
yeah, so it starts in like your spine, and you got to imagine that it's growing out of you. So its tail is like your butt, okay?
Tailbone.
Yeah, yeah. So you grab it and you yank it all the way through the crown chakra, and you cut off the head, and then it's kind of like when I cut off the head, the skin, there's no real skin, it's only in the astral realm, but the skin essentially comes with it, but you're plugging in that energy into the back of your head. So what that does is that's where channeling comes in. When people channel, it comes in through the back of the head mostly, and this is called your mouth of God chakra. So that's where things come from, and that's a lot of your deceptive things will come from there. So I'm plugging up that hole so that nothing is can deceive you. So now you're not being deceived within by the serpent, and you're not being deceived from without by the open mouth of God chakra. So I'm closing both of them off. So now it's acting like a road system essentially, that it's just coming.
The detour.
Yeah, it's going all the way up through you and around and clogging up everything. And it's not that the serpent's no longer in there. It's really just the Holy Spirit at that point. It's just your spiritual essence.
Okay, cool. Yeah, when I first heard you explain it, I think it was, to me, it was almost sounding like you were taking off part of it and leaving it.
No, I don't leave
So,
it.
so because I was like, oh, that might be like a deception where it's making you think it's gone, but it's really not. But I get how you're explaining it now. It's a lot more clear. So thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's a thing, like, I can't just magically like make someone a good person, from all their bad stuff. They have to actually go through the process. I just can get them started. I can baptize them in the Holy Spirit and get them in moving in the right direction, but I can't have them change their bad habits and understand that there's a better way of doing things for them. So that's why. So I have the spiritual baptisms, but I also have the mentorship program, which is only like $20 more. But that is a little bit more encompassing, where then we're having phone conversations, therapeutic counseling sessions, where we're talking on the phone and you're opening up to me about maybe your past traumas or maybe what you're going through at the moment. And then I can get inside of you that way through a mindful connection, and it doesn't have to be in a meditative state. And now understanding why you do the things that you do or why you feel the way that you feel, and I can give you exact information of how you can better yourself, like real one-on-one counseling type of stuff.
That's awesome, man. And you're doing it in the name of Christ. It sounds like to me, I found that that's where the most power comes from personally. Like, you'll know a tree by its fruit. And that's definitely why I've been drawn to Christ. Not only I feel like there's historical evidence of this power, whether it was physical person or just, the manifestation of it, but I definitely have felt like that name has brought more peace and power than anything.
Yeah,
After
absolutely.
looking into Buddhism, Hinduism, atheism, science, everything, right?
Yeah. I was down all those different paths. Like I said, I don't even know if I said it on air before, but when I had my first psychedelic trip, I saw Jesus and was told he wasn't for me. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm just gonna figure things out for my own. And then I was saved by Christ when I had that injury.
Joking.
Yeah, I had that injury and I was saved by him, and it's been so much greater ever since. There's a thing in New Age where they say no one's come to save you, you have to save yourself. And I think to some degree you do have to save yourself.
You have to be a willing participant for sure.
Oh yeah, the whole time you always have to be. But I think you have to climb up. Like, some people put themselves so far from Christ by sinning so much that they have to do it alone. But then once you look back on it, you were never alone. That's the thing, is that you think you are, or maybe you're cut off somehow.
I think that's a guilt
disconnected
thing, where you feel like you're alone because you feel the guilt.
I wasn't guilty.
What you've done.
I wasn't guilty, but it was definitely some kind of disconnection. It could be with some people
Pride?
guilt. It could be any number of things. It could have been anger for me. Was a wrath was a big one for me. So it could be any number of things that disconnects you, but we do have to do it to some degree ourselves. And then when Christ comes in, then you reflect back and you're like, oh, I was never alone. He was always walking me through.
Yeah, that's super good. And that's definitely how I felt in my journey, is that our sins separate us from God. But like, if we put in that effort, then he's always there, like you said, but we have to, the way I see it is like, God made this awesome kingdom, this great way to live, but he doesn't want to force anyone into it. So yeah, we have to
Yeah.
put in that effort. You have to choose to take the pill, right? If you want to use like a Matrix terminology or whatever. But yeah, he's not going to force his will on us because he is a graceful God. So that's how
Yeah.
I see it.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, this has been an awesome talk, guys. Is there anything else you want to mention before we end?
I don't think so. No, yeah, just what? Yeah, I'll mention my website, ImmanuelKingman.com. So it's IMMANUEL Kingman.com. You can hit me up for energy work. You can check out all the cool photos I have on there. You can check out all
the
my
episodes.
podcasts. Yeah, I think I might have to upload a few more videos on there. But I think all the audio are on there, and you can go to. I also have a podcast website, but I don't even care about that. You can find my podcast, Godcast: The Goodness Over Darkness podcast, on any audio platform, and you can find my YouTube channel, Goodness Over Darkness. And on there, I do live roundtables called The Human Race, a series called The Human Race, where I bring together like-minded individuals who may or may not know each other, who do slightly think differently, and we talk about topics that may be, I don't want to say controversial, but there's always a point of disagreement amongst us, and we work it out in a beautiful manner. And I think everyone who listens to it can always relate to at least one of the characters on the roundtable. And I do a live show with my buddy Andy Rouse called Worship in the Storm. Andy's host of the Deep Share podcast. So him and I, every 2 Fridays, every other Friday, we do the show called Worship in the Storm together. And you're one of the best watchers and commenters on there. You're always helping us out whenever we're looking up something. So, I want to thank you for all your participation.
Yeah, man. Thanks for putting out so much content. I look forward to it every week. It's so
Oh,
great
thank you.
because there's not a lot of content that I like in, mainstream, shows and movies and stuff. So having a reliable podcast has been really awesome. So thank you for all the work. I know it's a lot of effort doing all that.
Yes, it is. It burns me out sometimes, but I had a nice long break over Christmas and I was really rejuvenated. And now I don't feel as pressured as I was in December. So it feels much better. And, I'm definitely going to have you on as well. And
Yes.
I like making my podcast. Like you said, I don't like too many things out there. So I want to make my podcast to be my favorite podcast to listen to, because I listen back not only to hear myself and to see if I sounded good or if I sound goofy, but I also want to improve it as a producer and an editor. How can I make this a better product? And I also want to hear my guests in a different manner. So when I'm an interviewer, I'm listening, but I'm also anticipating to ask another question, or I
Right.
want to lead the conversation a certain way. But when I'm just listening and absorbing, I can hear two people talking back and forth. And like that Howdy McCoskey interview, man, that one, like listening back to myself, I'm like, wow, I was really on point that episode. So I love listening back to it, and it has nothing to do with being conceited, but I want my podcast to be my favorite. I mean, why wouldn't I? So I love putting out all this content.
Yeah,
I am
think
just honored for this to be my first podcast interview, technically.
Yes.
yes, thank
Technically,
you. I'm
'cause I
honored
don't
to have you be
always
the first
like to
guest.
be on camera and on audio, but I'm getting so much better. I'm showing up a lot more. And
She made a real effort to get here too. She
I
left her
did.
business partner
I was
high
like,
and
I
dry.
texted him like, stall, stall. I'm trying.
Yes, well, thank
I
you so
really
much for
wanted to
putting
be
in the
there.
effort. I always appreciate having another perspective. So it's very
I could see from your music and the other 2 episodes, I can see where you are right now, and I can see that there's no way but up for you. I mean, you're doing the right thing. You're on the right path.
well. Thank you very much. Thank you,
You're
guys. This has
welcome.
been really fun. I hope we can do it again soon, and I will see you all in the next one.
Truth isn't a lie, got them shaking in the booth. The truth isn't a lie, got them shaking in the booth. But I'm praying for them too.
Get your spirit straight before the clouds are parted.